Hi everyone, it's Anastasia Stoyanova with you, and this is a new episode of my podcast, English in Canada. And I know it's been a while, and I apologize. I'm trying to be consistent. However, I want to tell you that my team and we've been working on this amazing platform. It's a CellPip preparation platform that provides you with the writing feedback and speaking feedback. And it's been amazing. It's been very ambitious project. So I've been busy finishing that up as a methodologist and working with a team of programmers. So that's why please go check it out at English Stoyanova, Stoianova, Stoyanova, englishstoyanova.ca, CellPip platform. So please do that. But in today's episode, I'm going to talk about something that's very topical and pressing, and I think it's just a nice topic to talk about. And this is the main question that has been bothering me throughout all of my career as an English teacher, as an ESL instructor, and that is a native speaker better teacher than a non-native speaker? Okay, so that's the main question. Is a native speaker a good teacher? Is a non-native speaker always bad teacher, right? So, of course, I want to point out that it's a very provocative topic, right? And there is no right or wrong here. It's always based on your experience, but I want to point out several things, such as I want to point out at the research regarding native speakerism, what it is, and share my personal story in this episode, as well as talk about what a teacher actually needs, what a good teacher actually needs, irrespective of their origin, whether they are native or non-native English speakers, and not only English speakers, right? Because we all learn different languages. For example, right now I've been learning French also, and I've been polishing my French at the upper intermediate level, and I also have this experience of having good teachers and not so good teachers. So, and then I want to talk about the importance of this common errors problem or aspect for any English learner, I would say. Yeah, and then ultimately, at the end of the day, it's always about your choice, your goals, your experience. So let me ask you something straight away. Would you let a surgeon operate on you just because they have lived in their own body the whole life? They would say, oh, I have the same body, this is my body. Let me operate. Let me operate on you. So it's a small joke, of course. It's a little bit humorous, but just something to grab your attention. But honestly, a native English speaker knows their language the same way, right? Yes, bone deep and at this gut level. However, this doesn't make them a good teacher, of the English language like that, yeah, instantly. So what I mean by that is that surely a person might be a native speaker, they might sound great, they might have an amazing accent, right? I mean, it's not might, they have this accent, and that what is like a selling point, right? Especially if they're white. I don't want to sound rude or anything, but according to this, workplace discrimination research, so highly experienced non-native speakers lose their jobs because, well, they are not native, right? Though they do have all the qualifications, they do have experience, etc. But just because they don't have a certain passport, for example, a certain citizenship or certain looks, or even, race, just, color of their skin, then that's not great, but that's just the reality. So what is native speakerism? Native speakerism is a term coined by linguist Robert Phillipson, and this is me doing, a bit of research. When I was doing my master's degree, we talked about that a lot. There is the term linguistic imperialism, to be precise. So there is a certain thing. If you're a native speaker, if you're young, white, if you have a certain accent, North American accent, or British accent, then you are an ideal teacher in the minds of many schools, in the minds of parents and clients, etc. So I would say that ask yourself who the English language belongs to. Actually, most of the conversations worldwide are happening between non-native speakers. And I do think non-native speakers, teachers, deserve what we need. We truly need. We need this recognition. We need this admiration, the same way native speakers get irrespective of their qualifications or lack thereof. So what I'm trying to say is that non-native speakers have this right to have a chip on their shoulders, so to speak, which means we have this resentment. We feel resentful sometimes about being treated unfairly just because we are non-native. We were not born in Canada, let's say. I was not born in Canada, but I learned the English language, and I started doing that at the age of 4, or even younger. And the English language has been all my life. I've been passionate about it. I've been teaching it all my life. I've been helping people. I've been trained to do that. I have degrees, bachelor's degree, master's degree, specializing in the English language education. So, this is very pressing because all my career I struggled and I competed with so many English language native speakers who would just open this door and just say, I'm a native speaker, just hire me. And a lot of schools do, unfortunately. However, I want to say that I want to just tell you this. Imagine, so I'm a Russian native speaker. Yeah. So my mother tongue is Russian. And imagine this, if somebody asks me, hey, so you speak Russian, that's your first language, that's your native language, can you teach it? We're going to hire you tomorrow. You're a native speaker. What am I going to say? I'm going to say no. Why? This is very important. I've never been trained to do so. I've never been trained to teach Russian, for example. So ultimately, my response would be like, hold on, at least I need to get a certain training. So what I'm trying to say is that whenever you want to hire a tutor, or whenever you look at all those native speakers at the language schools, you got to ask yourself, how many of them actually have the qualifications to do that? For example, CELTA certification, yeah? That's an internationally recognized qualification. So I'm going to say what a good teacher actually needs. First of all, international qualification like CELTA or Delta. For example, I did my CELTA at International House London in the UK. Also, you got to understand that, of course, a degree would be even better. If it's the English language or if it's linguistics, for example, or education. That would make a good teacher stand out. And of course, personality plays a big role as well on top of that, because you don't want to spend your time learning from someone who is too stuffy, too academic. But at the same time, you want this person to be charismatic, charming even. I would say that non-native speakers, teachers, have been through the same struggle as their learners, especially if they share the same language, the same first language. In my case, I work with a lot of Russian speakers, Ukrainian speakers, so I know exactly what they're struggling with. So it makes it easier for me to teach. And also the ability to explain errors. If we don't say just, we don't say like that, or, we say like this. Yeah, what a native speaker usually does, what they do, they usually say like this. Yeah, we don't say like that, we don't say like that. That's the whole explanation. They don't see the language as a system, and that's a big thing. So I think that a non-native speaker knows a language inside out completely and thoroughly because, they know how to break it down. They've been through the same struggle as you are. in my career, when I was working for one of the language schools here in Toronto, so some students would come up to me and they would say, thank you. They would say, you truly can see what we struggle with most. And they could compare because they had native speakers as their teachers as well. And they saw that not all of them were as great. I don't want to brag, but that's the truth. Sometimes a native speaker would just come to your classroom unprepared and just wing it. It's not a good thing at all. You always got to have a lesson plan. That's what you got to have. You always got to give homework. You always got to correct errors, give feedback, and many other things that, according to the methods and methodology of the teaching, of the English language teaching, are very important. So I want to say that, well, non-native teachers can actually have the upper hand, so to speak. They have this advantage over native speakers because we know the pain points. We've been there ourselves. Also, research shows that students often trust non-native speakers as well, especially if they share their first language. For native speakers, grammar is hardwired. So they don't, in most cases, they don't have any reasoning. I remember my CELTA training, what I was doing with native speakers of the English language. Most of them were native speakers with British accent, and they had a certain advantage. Most of them were white, and of course they would get hired, of course. But to me, it was just a bit disappointing when, for example, they were asked, what is this grammar form? What is this called? Or why? Why do we need this grammar form in the language? And they could not respond. But at least what made me glad is that those people came to get this training done, right? So that's a good thing. So you got to ask yourself, is your native speaker teacher good enough? Do they have this training, for example, international training for teachers or not? So, but in most cases, of course, when I started learning French, I learned French from a non-native speaker teacher who has been living in France for a long time, right? And she had a degree in teaching, and she had an experience teaching French, experience in teaching French for a long time, and so on and so forth. So experience, qualifications, and personality are those three things that are important for me personally when I hire someone to teach me a language. I want to also point out that when I teach Russian speakers or Ukrainian speakers, there are certain things that I already know that they will struggle with, right? So even if you don't share the same language with the students who you are teaching, you gotta do your research and know the pain points. So for Ukrainian Russian speakers are articles, for example, present perfect, there's the tense with no twin, as I want to call it, prepositions, modal verbs, conditionals, gerunds and infinitives are those topics that they struggle with most. Also, double negatives, because in the Russian language there are so many double negatives, as well as in the Ukrainian language as well. I know exactly what to pinpoint when it comes to pronunciation as well. For example, the sounds w and v, and open versus more closed, and so on. Final consonants that constantly get devoiced, like the word bad, they would say bat, they would devoice Russian speakers, Ukrainian speakers. So, and other things like adjectives, boring and bored. Russian and Ukrainian speakers tend to say, I'm boring, right? When they actually mean that they are bored. So you got to be able to explain that. So I would say a practical takeaway is you got to ask yourself, does your teacher have an international certification to back up their their teacher's training experience? How much classroom experience do they actually have? Can they explain grammar? Can they explain complex grammar in a plain way, in a simple way, in a very understandable way? Do they understand the specific struggles that the students have? And remember that just having a certain citizenship or passport or having a certain skin color and accent does not guarantee you that there is a good teacher in front of you, right? I just want to make this episode because it's very personal to me. Throughout my career, I've been competing with all those native speakers that just take things for granted. They were born just knowing English the way they do. They never earned this. That's what bothers me most, right? And most of them don't even have qualifications. And this world is a very unfair place, unfortunately. But what can we do? We can be optimists, right? We can be more optimistic. We can do our research. We can judge a teacher, not just by the mere fact whether they are native speakers or not, but by their qualifications, by their personality, the way they deliver their lessons, right? And of course, I'm not saying that accent is not important. Accent is very important. I have been working on my accent all my life. And trust me, of course, I have an accent. I still have some leftovers of my Russian accent. I'm pretty sure I do, But the good thing is that, for example, when native speakers here in Canada, they cannot easily pinpoint where I'm from, right? Just maybe judging by my appearance or something. They figure out, oh, maybe somewhere from Europe, right? But that's a good thing, and that's been the biggest quest of my life, actually, trying to sound more native-like, because that's what gives you the job ultimately, and your personality as well as qualifications. I hope so, right? So thank you so much for listening to this episode. Next time, I will talk about some things like what makes a good English lesson or a good lesson overall, and some things that are related to my life as well. And I'll share some personal stories with you that I prepared. So stay in touch. Go check out my website, englishstoyanova.ca, or just put, English Stoyanova CellPip platform. And that's been the biggest project so far that we've been working on. And I hope to see you very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.